Hello, my name is Dottie Schindlinger, and I'm the Executive Director of the Diligent Institute, part of Diligent Corporation, which is the world's largest software company providing software to boards and senior leadership teams of companies globally. It's my great pleasure to be here with you today with two fantastic panelists to talk about this incredibly important topic, the gender diversity on corporate boards and leadership teams in the Mideast and Africa region companies. Just a couple of housekeeping announcements before we start with our presentation today. This session will be recorded and is going to last 45 minutes. There will be the opportunity for you to ask questions, and we would very much like to hear from you throughout the session. Please just feel free to type in your questions. We also will provide a recording of this session to everyone who participates after the fact, so you'll receive a link to the recording after the session. And finally, everyone is going to be in listen-only mode because it is being recorded. So first, let me introduce my two co-panelists. I'm joined today by two exceptional businesswomen, Abir Leheta, who is the chairman and CEO of Egytrans, and Caroline Fakhoury, who is the founder of Stand for Women. Ladies, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you.
I'm going to actually ask each of you, if you don't mind, to give a much better introduction of yourselves than I've just done. Because other than your names and your titles, we don't really know too much yet. So I'd love to have you share a bit more about your background. And Caroline, if you don't mind, I'll start with you. And what I'd like to ask you to do is to please share with us a bit of your background as it relates to becoming a corporate leader. What was that journey like for you?
Hi, Dottie. Hi, Abir. Thank you for hosting us today. How can I summarize maybe 25 plus years of corporate experience? Maybe I started in a multinational organization called Unilever. I worked with them in France, Argentina, and Lebanon in marketing and sales positions. And then I joined our family business, the Fattal group, which is a sizable family business that has more than 120 years in this region. And we're operating in 8 countries in the Middle East. I grew up the ladder in the family business from the food and beverage assistant general manager to heading the corporate functions to today being on the board of directors. The journey has not been easy. I'm sure we'll have the time to discuss that. I was the first woman from the family to reach the boardroom after more than 100 years of existence. I was the youngest, etc. I think we will cover that later. And then this all led me to want to create a platform called Stand for Women, which is all about women's economic empowerment, because I wanted more women to reach the boardroom and probably, hopefully, with less complications than I got. So this is in a nutshell. I have experience in sales, marketing, logistics, HR, IT, I mean, all the back office functions as well. And it has been a beautiful journey, and I love the business community, as well as now helping other women.
Thank you so much, Caroline. Quick follow-up question for you before we introduce Abir. Are you the only woman still on that board, or have others joined you since?
No, others joined me since, so things have improved.
That's excellent. Thank you so much. Abir, may I ask you the same question? I'd love for you to share your journey to become a corporate leader, specifically of a company in a traditionally male-dominated field. So share with us a little bit of background.
Hey, hello, Caroline, and hello, Dottie. I'm very happy to be here with you, and thank you for inviting me. Where I'm concerned, I joined our family business almost straight out of college, maybe about a year or a year and a half after graduating, and it wasn't really originally my intention. My older brother had joined it before me, and I studied computer science, and it happened that at the time I graduated, our company was looking to automate a lot of its processes and create a new IT system, and so that was the purpose of my joining. And I kind of went through many of the different functions within the company over the years, through the IT department, and then into a variety of things, including organizational development, including quality, including strategy. And my last position in 2015 was as Chief Strategy Officer. And I had been for a number of years by then on the board of the company, and the company had really transformed a lot. It was no longer technically a family business, although my brother was heading the company at the time, after my father, who had passed away some years before. And so I had been on the board for maybe 7 or 8 years. I was a big part of the executive team of the company at the time. And then the unthinkable happened, and my older brother fell ill and passed away in a very, very short time, within a couple of months of when he fell ill. And I found myself in a position where I was asked by all of the major shareholders, by the board, to step into his role as chairman and CEO of the company, which at the time was a very, very difficult step for me, because I did not feel prepared, and there had never been any clear-cut intention for that to happen. But with a lot of support and with a lot of learning, and I was able to do that, and here I am 6 years later, still in that position.
Thank you both so much for sharing your stories. It sounds like you both have such unique stories, but also I think very relatable. I think many of the people who will be joining us on our webinar will potentially have similar stories of their own, or maybe even be going through stories as well that are similar. Let's talk briefly about the situation as it exists in the region. There was some recent research that was done by a group called IFC in 2019 that showed only 14% of board members in Lebanon, for example, are female. And a joint study by the American University in Cairo and the Egyptian Stock Exchange found that as of July 2020, there were only 10.8% of board seats held by women in Egypt. So it is definitely something that is an area of growth in both countries, and is below maybe in some other regions. So we know that globally about 24% of board seats are held by women, which still is not a very large number, but is a little bit larger. And so I'd love to ask you both your thoughts about what are some of the biggest drivers happening right now in the Mideast North Africa region to bring more women into corporate leadership roles. Caroline, I wonder if I could start with you. What are your thoughts about that?
I can talk for Lebanon and for what I know from the region. In Lebanon, there is a drive that was launched by the Lebanese League for Women in Business to have 20% or 25% women on boards by whatever 2025, and now they've pushed it because of the crisis in Lebanon to 2030. The drive was also to make all institutions to sign this, major corporations to do it, and it was in a good momentum till, of course, the crisis in Lebanon hit. So I think there is a lot. There is a project also being launched for parliament discussions, but the country now is in a deadlock, so I'm not sure this is the current priority. But very frequently you have articles, you have podcasts that are mentioning the importance of having more women on boards and the economic impact of gender diversity. Women in Lebanon, like in many places in the world, are, have the power of the purse. They are the decision makers in a lot of purchases, and their voice has to be heard in all the echelon of companies. So it's a matter that's being discussed. There is a lot of awareness being done. I do it also through my platform, Stand for Women. Things are changing very slowly, and maybe the statistics that you're mentioning, yes, if you go to the Register of Commerce, you will find name of board members, but a lot of time these boards are not functioning, they are not real, or it's just paper boards. So in reality, I'm not sure in the really functioning boards what is the real percentage of women today. So I'm sure with time things will change, but unfortunately they are changing too slowly. my point of view. And if I compare my story also like the one of Abir, I entered the boardroom because my father passed away. After my father passed away, and it's maybe in our generation it was still because you were filling the place of, you know, a father, a brother, in the case of Abir or something. And I hope we're opening up, that women like us are opening up the path for, you know, our daughters just to be in the boardroom just because of their own, you know, not that we are not competent, but that competence will bring them there. And because you know, the families, because the family businesses represent 85% of the private business in the region, that the companies and families will really understand that the diversity is a must, and that we bring, you know, complementary voices to the table. Maybe I'll leave Abir to complete what I said.
Well, Abir, let's thank you so much, Caroline. Abir, let's turn to you. I'd love to have you pick up on that thread and maybe talk about what you see as some of the biggest consequences for a lack of diversity in the boardroom and in the C-suite.
Well, I think that a lack of diversity, and here I'm not just talking about gender, but the concept of diversity in and of itself, just leads to fewer perspectives being represented at the table. It's more likely to lead to a kind of groupthink if everybody is kind of thinking in a similar way. And I think really that to be effective, boards need to have real discussions about the real issues. And I think, like Caroline said, women are oftentimes the majority of the consumer decision makers. If they're not represented on the other side, then a lot of the time their needs are not, you know, taken into account. I think that if we don't really have sufficient diversity, then we're missing out on a huge amount of talent and experience that exists in half of the population. So really, the more that women and the more that minorities are represented equally and have a voice, then the more we can really make change, and the more we can address the issues that exist in the world, and the more growth we can achieve. And I think that that's demonstrated by the research, that when you have more women on boards, this reflects positively on the results and performance of the companies that have more women. It also reflects on things like ethics and integrity and governance. And most importantly, I think that, and also I'll refer back to what Caroline just said, when you have more women at the top layers in leadership, then this tends to cascade down, and it becomes easier for more and more women to be represented at all levels.
Caroline, I wonder if you have anything that you'd like to add to that, because I think there's so much to be said about the some of the detriments for companies if they do not embrace diversity, but what are also some of the, some of the benefits that companies can realize when they do embrace diversity in their C-suites and their boardrooms?
You know, one of the important things I see is also inspiration. You know, if she can do it, I can do it. Not only for the women in the company, but for the women outside of the company. Yesterday, I was seeing an article, I think in the New York Times, about a cartoon that showed a woman doctor, a Black woman doctor, and how it had generations of young girls in America, black young girls who never thought they could be doctors to become doctors. So I mean, you know, as Gina Davis says it, she said, if you can see it, you can be it. And so I didn't see women from my family or outside my family in the boardroom. I was the first one. It was difficult, but maybe now for other girls, for my daughters, for my niece, nephews, or whatever, then it's going to be the norm, you know. And so first, the inspiration that I can do it. And then I would say the economic importance of also having really having different voices at the table. I realize really that men and women, of course, when I'm saying I realize when we are in the boardroom, how complementary we are, how different perspective really, you know, sometimes you would not think the same way, and having different perspective around the table enriches dialogue and helps really make the right decisions. And I would insist, like Abir is saying, diversity, gender diversity is one of the diversities, but then there are others, you know, it can be a nationality, it can be race, it can be religion, it can be, you know, disability, it can be a lot of things, people with special needs. I mean, companies would really, I realized that also when I entered the non-corporate world in an NGO setup, you know, I realized how much when I was fully only in my corporate years, and I felt I was in an ivory tower. I was disconnected by what was happening in the social environment in my country. So I mean, really bringing different voices of people who have probably nothing to do with your business also could really enrich the conversation and make you make more informed decisions from different angles.
You bring up so many good points, both of you, because I know that in the research that we did at Diligent Institute last year on gender diversity globally, we were learning that not only are companies bringing women onto their boards, but they are bringing specific women. They're bringing women with different skill sets, different experience and expertise onto the board. And so they're really kind of reaping the benefit of multiple diverse perspectives by bringing women onto the board. That it's not just the fact that they are women, but they also bring a different set of experience to the table. I'm curious to know, I mean, there's so many different benefits that companies can derive from having more diversity, diverse perspectives. It serves as a bulwark against risk. It gives them a potential new way to see opportunity. So what are the barriers? What are the things standing in the way of companies embracing diversity fully and bringing more women into the board and the C-suite? Caroline, do you want to start? And then Abir, I'd love to hear your thoughts as well. What are the biggest barriers?
What I hear sometimes, I mean, is that there are no women candidates, you know. This is what I hear a lot of times. And then I say, maybe you haven't looked enough. And, you know, Christine Lagarde, she used to, when these things would happen in politics, she would have a list in her bag, she would take it out and she would say, this is a list of 15 women who are, you know, ready and able for political aspirations or whatever. And I think, we're trying here also to do the same, to build a database of women who are ready and able. And I think in my experience, it's true that I say I fell into the boardroom maybe because of a very sad incident. But then I earned it. And because I had this lack of confidence whether I really was worthy of being there, I did 2 certifications for board of directors. And so what I'm saying here is that the confidence in ourselves is paramount, because we ask ourselves a lot of questions. Am I worthy of being here? Do I have the right voice to be around this table? Will my perspective really enrich the conversation? And by doing not 1 but 2 certifications, there are many of them internationally and they're accredited, I really felt that no, I know, and I learned what I didn't know, and I felt after that more comfortable into bringing my own perspective. And because not only that, you know, I don't know for Abir, but I was the only woman at that time. I was the youngest, and I had my uncles and auditors, lawyers around the table. So at the beginning, you feel intimidated. You're not sure if really, you know, because youth and being a woman were 2 things that, you know, brought a different perspective. So to answer your question, I just said that sometimes it's supposedly the lack of candidates and it's wrong. And so there are a lot of women very ready and able. And even Bloomberg had told me that this was one of the things that their journalists, they couldn't find women to speak on Bloomberg TV. I think they had too many men doing the news part or the financial part. And also, you know, I had a list to give them for the MENA region. So you have to look a little bit, dig deeper, because there are a lot of women candidates. But they said that, for example, when it comes to TV interviews, women don't like to see themselves on TV. They hate to be on a screen. They hate to see their voice or whatever. And this is also about us So it was my second point, is to get confident and to really believe that regardless of where we stand, we have something and we can add value.
Very, very important points. Abir, any other thoughts to add to the list of potential barriers keeping women out of C-suites and boardrooms?
Yeah, definitely. But first of all, I want to really kind of second what Caroline said, because there is this myth that there are not enough qualified women. And I think that there really needs to be an effort to counteract that. One of the things I'm really happy with is that here in Egypt, they've created an online database of board-ready women, so that no company has an excuse. They can find lists of women with many different qualifications if they are looking for someone. And I also want to second the idea that very often the biggest barrier is the woman herself. I think that women are statistically much more likely to suffer from what they call imposter syndrome. And I also had and continue to have always the idea of, am I qualified enough? Am I able enough? Is this too challenging? And that's why it's very important for there to be, I think, role models and examples of women who have actually done this, and also mentorship and support systems for women, and associations of women, working together and supporting each other, and also having male champions within any organization who believe in women. The other, I think, big barriers are cultural and social, and that's definitely a big one. I think I was reading recently that even though the UAE has now mandated that companies should have at least one female board member, the speed of that being adopted is actually quite slow, and a big part of the reason is because of the cultural and social barriers, even on the part of the women themselves, and also perhaps lack of family support, because it really does take a kind of support from the family, from the spouse, for women to step into these kinds of roles. And finally, I would say that we need to do a lot of work on inclusiveness policies within organizations, and that's really all the way from the bottom up. Having policies that support women at work and support their success, because when you don't have these things in place, then many women may drop out of the workforce or choose to stay in lower positions and not take on the challenge and grow up or go up along the ladder. So those are the main things that I see.
It also occurs to me that there's a unique set of pressures that come with being the first woman or the only woman in a boardroom, on a C-suite, in a leadership position. I think probably each of us has versions of this tale that we can tell. I think the three of us represent individuals who have had leadership positions in male-dominated fields and male-dominated industries. And so I'd love to maybe ask if we could share some of those experiences and reflections for the benefit of other women who are thinking about taking a position and may find themselves being the only person in the room. What is that experience like, and how do you kind of overcome that discomfort and bring that diverse perspective that the organization is clearly seeking by having you be in that position? So what are your thoughts about the best way to kind of have that confidence and overcome that hurdle? Caroline, do you want to maybe reflect on that first?
Yes. At the beginning, I didn't realize that I was the only woman. I mean, it didn't strike me because that was the norm when I started my career. But for example, I was the first and the only woman sales director in Unilever, Middle East, North Africa, Pakistan. So when we used to go to the sales director meetings, first I was the youngest again, and I was the only woman, so I was in the middle of the picture, surrounded by maybe 40 men. And I didn't realize it till really I met, to build on what Abir said, I met a mentor called Penina Thompson. And Penina wrote a book that I really advise to all of the attendees. It's called A Woman's Place is in the Boardroom. And then she complemented it with another book called A Woman's Place is in the Boardroom, The Roadmap. And in the roadmap, she explained that there are, I think, 9 or 11 signposts to reaching the boardroom for women. The ones that struck me the most and that really helped me were about, first, a woman has to open up her stall. We are not so good at marketing ourselves, at opening up our network, building the network, but this is so key if you want to reach the boardroom. I'm saying, of course, some of us have family businesses where even though it's difficult for us to reach the boardroom of our family businesses, but then for people who want to reach the board of other businesses, it's very important to open up your stall, talk about what you do in a very authentic manner, because what women don't like, and I find that in my coaching practice, they hate not to be authentic. They really don't like to brag. And so talking about yourself, your achievements from a place of authenticity and power, and is something that is a must, according to Penina. Understanding also that in companies there are written rules, but there are also a lot of unwritten rules. And so trying to understand intuitively what are the unwritten rules in this business. Another of her advices would be not to be stuck in jobs that are labeled for women, like HR, etc. Try and have jobs where you have P&L responsibility, where you have overall business overview, because otherwise they say, okay, she's just good in this technical thing, but she doesn't have an overall business mindset. Different things that make us board ready. And this book and what she said really opened my eyes about how how we can be more, how we can break this thing of being the only one, the first one, or the youngest one. So I don't know for Abir how that was.
Well, for me, I think that I was fairly lucky. I didn't really experience that because I don't know if my company is unusual in that way, but I think that since its inception as a family business, there has never been a time when there wasn't at least one woman on the board, even though it's over 40 years old. So I was not the first, and I think throughout my years on the board, most of those years I was not the only woman on the board. I think really the key for me is that within my either executive roles or board roles, I don't see myself as any different. I don't see myself as a woman, and then the person seated next to me is a man. I'm a person who is playing a responsible role in this place to the best of my ability, and being a professional. And so is the person in the next in the next seat. And maybe I was lucky enough because I was in a family business to never have had that really strongly challenged or questioned. I was accepted as being a professional in my in my role. So I think that this is the mindset that women should approach things with, as being completely equal, and this is their place that they have earned or are really working.
I think that's terrific. I do want to push past a little bit into a new topic area, which is about the need for companies to maybe think a little bit more holistically around diversity. In some of the research that we did, while we found that half of the 1,600 companies in our sample in Lebanon had at least one female board member, women only represent 14% of all board members in the same space. Same in Egypt. There was an analysis that concluded at least 47% of companies, both listed and private, have at least one female director, but they only represent 14% of all board members of listed and private companies in the country. So I want to talk about that phenomenon because it does seem that for many companies, when they have one woman serving on the board or one woman serving in the C-suite, they might stop seeking additional women. And I want to talk about what are your thoughts around why is that happening and how we might be able to push beyond that boundary and really fully embrace diversity beyond just having one person that represents diversity. Caroline, do you have thoughts about that? And then I'll ask Abir to share as well.
You know, a company have to really believe in the power of having diversity, because if it's just to tick a box, you know, then, you know, it happened a lot when there were quotas imposed in some countries, etc. And so they just tick the box. Although, you know, when I started digging on this subject maybe 25 years ago, I really felt that the quotas were not needed, that things would happen by themselves. But now, 25 years down the line, seeing that the numbers have you know, increased, I mean, the participation of women in boards has increased so slowly, I am now for temporary, at least, quotas for a few years to force companies to make the change. And then once they realize the advantage of it and how the discussions, hopefully, and the results are better, that they really take this as a normal phenomenon. Now, being the only woman, I think it was a McKinsey study that says that if you are alone, it's sometimes difficult to just, you know, speak out loud what you have to say, especially if the boards are of 9 people or more. Being one is, like, you know, difficult, and especially if you're younger, which was my case. I really felt I was more silent at the beginning. I wanted to listen, to grasp, to make sure I had everyone's views before I would dare to open, you know, and open up. And so they say that if you are 3, that's for a board of 9 to 12, this would be the, I mean, minimum of 3 would be the optimal, so you can build on each other. I don't know if it's right, but the study says as well that we go into a competition mode, and we women. I'm not sure about that. For the moment, we are 2 women in our family business. It was and so I haven't experienced this competition thing, but I am so happy that I'm not alone anymore. And so this would be my own personal experience. I'm also in the boardroom since I did all my certification and I felt more confident. I have been also called to sit on other boards, and in a microfinance company, we are 50%, and it's really very nice. I mean, in a board of 6, I think 3 are women, 3 are men, and it's really you know, when companies are really committed to that, it gives a very nice you know, conversation level and listening to each other. So this is a small of what I have experienced.
Thank you so much. Abir, what are your thoughts about how companies can change this dynamic and push beyond just having, you know, a single person that represents diversity in their boardrooms and C-suites?
I think that it really requires a commitment from the top, and it requires a vision towards that. And I do agree that I think quotas are necessary, and even in spite of quotas, the progress is very slow. In Egypt, for example, in 2020, the Financial Regulatory Authority decreed that every listed company has to have at least 1 woman on the board, and in spite of that, it's 2021, and still about 42% of companies don't have any women on the board. So I really think there needs to be more awareness. There needs to be more, you know, activity and speaking about this in forums like this webinar and other, you know, many other organizations. And I think that really companies need to understand the value of adding more women, because that message is not necessarily, you know, fully everywhere. So I think those are some of the big things.
I think that's extremely right. And I also think some of the points that Caroline mentioned from the McKinsey study are so fascinating, right? That once there are 3 women on the board, there's a very different dynamic. And in fact, I think they saw most of the positive financial performance correlation once there were 3 or more women on the board. And if there were fewer than 3 women, they didn't necessarily see as strong a financial performance correlation as when you bring in 3 women. So it's very interesting. It's almost adding more women equals more dollars. So kind of an interesting way to think about it. I will share with you, we did some research with the New York Stock Exchange last year where we wanted to find out about board refreshment practices and board composition. And I'd love to ask your thoughts about this, because one of the things that we learned was that while the overwhelming majority of companies on the New York Stock Exchange have diversity programs in place, they have specific goals around diversity, very few of them have actually set a time frame within which they are to meet those goals. And I wondered your thoughts about just looking at some of the practices that companies have that might actually be getting in their own way. Another example of that was we asked whether or not they had ever created a diverse-only slate of candidates, meaning candidates that all look different from the existing board members in some way. And that was a very small percentage that have taken that approach. And another very small percentage have instituted any sort of a like an overall tenure limit on board service. So, maybe once someone has served 20 years or something, they have to leave and make space for new people to come in with fresh perspectives. I'd love to hear your thoughts about any of these strategies as ways to really change the outcome for companies. And, to your point a moment ago, if there are requirements from the exchanges that are not being put into place, what are some actual tactical ways that we can change the outcome for companies? What are some things that might happen that would really make a difference? Abir, maybe I'll start with you and then I'll ask Caroline to share her thoughts.
Yeah, I think that you cannot really make progress unless you have a target. I do think that there should be, every company should have some kind of vision of, what they are looking at and a commitment towards that. I don't lean very much towards the idea of having a diverse only. I do think that companies need to be open and to really pick the most qualified candidate. But if they do that, then I do believe that there will be many more women on boards than there are today. So those are my thoughts. I think that there should be policies in place. There should be clarity, and there is a framework, for that is being set in place by the exchanges, by governments, government policies, by the SDGs, and so any company that really takes that on will find a lot of support to be able to do that. And at the same time, I think there needs to be encouragement of women themselves to step up and become candidates, become serious candidates for these positions.
Caroline, what are your thoughts?
At first, companies have to take governance seriously. I would say this is the first step, because boardrooms till not very long ago were like a more gentleman club. It was a place where you would put previous ministers, previous lawyers, just maybe something honorific. But when the major scandals happened in the region with some corporations that collapsed, and then they digged into the attendance of the board, the composition of the board, they realized that it was just name boards with people who are just there and not attending, etc. So first, companies have to take boards seriously. The boardroom is really a place where strategic decisions are made, that is steering the company, checking on on what the management is proposing and making sure things are on the right track. So once you start to do that, you start to analyze the composition of your board. Who do you want to be there? You start to think about diversity. So I mean, the first step is really to take that seriously. And then you have other steps, which is like, for example, if you have committees who are recruitment committees for the boardroom, that you can ask them that, you know, we want at least that in the CVs that you're going to review, the headhunters or whoever is going to send you some people, at least they send you 50% CVs of women or 30% or whatever you put. So really they push the headhunter to bring women CVs, because otherwise, as I always have an answer, there are no women candidates. No, it's not true. Go and dig further. I will not take men candidate if you don't bring me the same number of women candidates for the board. And so these kind of techniques can really help increase the diversity. But governance has to be taken seriously. It's not a name game. A board is a serious, you know, thing that complements the company's management, I mean, the way of managing a company and steering the business.
So we only have just a couple of minutes left, and so I'd like to ask you each to share some final thoughts, and I'd love to maybe project into the future a little bit. So what do we think that boardrooms will look like 5 years from now? What do you hope it will look like 5 years from now, let's say? So Caroline, I'll start with you if you don't mind.
Well, I think COVID-19 has really changed the way the world will work, and I think it has taught us, at least for me, I saw that the boardroom has taken very different dynamics, especially in Lebanon with a very deep crisis we went in. Sometimes the board had to meet much more often than usually, and also so I think boards will evolve according to needs and to crisis, and we're going to have many, and in the coming future, because we're living in VUCA environment in this region. At the same time, I felt that with COVID, some of the boards we were more in tune to do them virtually rather than physical, which was sometimes an obstacle to have people from different parts of the world to join your boardroom. You know, you have to all the travel stuff and everything. I would think that also all these governance things have shown that they are key to sustainability of businesses. So and the conversation on having diversity is continuing. I only wish that the change was faster, and that we shouldn't wait for 25 more years, or as McKinsey says, 100 and more years, which would be dramatic for the numbers to change, really.
Thank you. Abir, your thoughts for where we should be 5 years from now?
Well, I think that, I don't know, I personally, and this is purely anecdotal, I don't have, you know, statistics, but my feeling is that the last 2 or 3 years, there has really been more and more and more of a conversation around diversity and around the role of women in a lot of different areas, and women in the boardroom is definitely, you know, a big one. And I think that there is change. I mean, in Egypt, the board representation for women grew about, in listed companies, grew about 30% in the past year. Yes, that's still small because it went up from 10% to 13%. Okay, but still, if that were to be sustained 30% a year for some years, then you would see a real change. And so I do think that we are moving in the right direction, but I agree that we could be moving more quickly. And I think it's very important that we keep a sustained effort. This conversation needs to continue. We need to, you know, to be, you know, emphasizing this again and again, and not just at the boardroom. It needs to be at all levels, because you need women coming down, you know, or coming up from the bottom to, you know, eventually reach that level. And for example, in an industry like ours, which is traditionally male dominated, that's even more challenging to change the perception and to encourage, you know, more women to come in and see themselves as potential leaders in these places. And I think my hope in 5 years is not just for more representation for women on boards, but also more representation for women at the very top. Because I was looking at the statistics, and if we do have, you know, 13% women in boardrooms, but if we look at how many chair women we have, then it's more like 4%. And so, you know, really, the more and more women there are at all levels, the more women there will be on the board. And the more women there are on the board, the more, you know, chairwomen and CEOs there will be. And that's really my my wish for the next 5 years.
Well, I want to say a very special thank you to the two of you for joining me today. It's been a really terrific conversation, very thought-provoking, and hopefully providing a lot of value for those who attended the webinar. So very special thank you to Abir Leheta, Chairman and CEO of Egytrans, and Carolyn Fattal Fakhoury, who is the founder of Stand for Women. Thank you both so much for joining me today.
Thank you,
Thank you,
Dottie.
Dottie. Thank you, Abir.
Thank you.